As I mentioned, my name is David Shepherd and I'm the Head of Market Development for Refinitiv for our risk business. And I'm delighted to have Lana Pebley with me, a good friend and I'm sure a familiar face to many of you here for multiple stints, including her time as Head of Sanctions with Barclays and some time with Louis Dreyfus, the UN, KPMG and so forth. And Lana is now wearing her newest hat, which is as the Chief Compliance Officer for the Ras Al Khaimah Free Zones. And she'll correct me on the actual title of that when she jumps into the conversation. Two more faces which I think are probably very familiar to everyone in the room. And of course we've got Brian Stywart, who's now our CEO of the Dubai Financial Services Authority, and also Her Excellency Dr. Mariam Al-Suwaidi. And genuinely just from our side, a massive thank you for being here. I think it's customary that you're meant to get up here and say how busy your panelists are and they've made the time for us, but trying to get these guys onto a phone call just to talk to each other is a virtual disaster, so I can guarantee they are extremely busy and it's an absolutely fascinating time for us to be bringing this particular panel to the fore. I think it's also something that we should comment on, which is that we are seeing our regulators here doing more and more in terms of actually outreach to the community. There's been some fantastic sessions led by Dr. Mariam up at the Central Bank this year. The DFSA are running multiple sort of outreach sessions, and to have the RAC Authority here as well to talk today, I think is an outstanding start. So what we're going to try and run through today is we're going to touch on we're going to ask Mariam to give us the latest on the UAE Mutual Evaluation Project. We're also then going to get kind of what's going on at the DFSA, what are you guys doing in preparation, and again from Lana for the RAC Authority. Then we're actually going to touch on the NRA results and get some commentary around that and what people are starting to think, and I'm sure there'll be some questions in the audience around that. And also, of course, the latest on the UAE AML law, which has been updated recently. But I am going to try and make sure that I keep an eye on this clock at the front, so we're going to run through those pieces quite quickly. And I anticipate there's some good questions in the audience which will beat the ones that I prepared. So without any further ado, let me ask Her Excellency Mariam Al-Suwaidi, perhaps we can ask you to give us the latest on where we are.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me. So, David, please stop me because there's so many things to talk about in regards to the mutual evaluation. So, as you already know by now that the UAE is scheduled for the mutual evaluation in 2019, so this year. The on-site visit will be in June, the first 2 weeks of June. Sorry, the first 2 weeks of July, sorry. So we're really very busy and hopefully everything will just pay off. The UAE has a structure with a ministerial supervision, which is, at the top of this structure is the National Anti-Money Laundering and the campaigning of terrorism and financing of illegal organization, so which I will refer to the National Committee. So this committee comprises of many entities, which of course they're involved in fighting of ML and TF in the country. It is formed by His Highness the Minister of Finance, and it's chaired by His Excellency the Minister of the Governor of the Central Bank. So it is really, it is the highest authority in the land here, and it sets the AML CFT policies, and it leads the domestic coordination between all entities. So this committee started by establishing 3 subcommittees in order to help it in its work and to prepare the country for the mutual evaluation. So the 3 subcommittees were the NRA subcommittee, the Laws and Regulation subcommittee, as well as the Free Zone subcommittee. So the NRA it is in charge of conducting and maintaining the NRA, the National Risk Assessment Report. I'm going to speak shortly about this for the sake of time. The legal subcommittee is responsible for making sure that the current and existing law are compatible with combating the risk of money laundering. And the free zone, which is, of course, look over the oversight of the free zones and whether their laws are compatible again with the FATF standards. So after that, the NRA started with the reaching out and outreach to the private sector. I mean, I'm going to refer to them with the regulated entities. We don't name them private sector over here. In this project, we name them the regulated entities. So we have started in late, I think beginning 2017 by reaching out to them and listening to them and just listening to their operation how can they can be exploited for MLTF risks. Then the UAE conducted a comprehensive self-assessment in coordination to the FATF standards when it comes to technical compliance and effectiveness. So that was done thoroughly with all the stakeholders and regulated competent authorities as well as regulated entities at the beginning. And then they were consultant assigned for this project, so the formal NRA process started. And when that started, we it was contained with the regulated entities at the beginning. So after that, in the late of 2017, the higher committee was established. And it was really a great move and a great initiative. It was established by the cabinet, the cabinet of ministers. It means we have the highest commitment at the ministerial level in the country for this project. It is chaired by His Excellency, the Minister of Financial Affairs, and his deputy is the governor, the chairman of the National Committee. So these two committees started meeting together, and they have like almost maybe 14 or 13 meetings so far. And after that, the higher committee established a PMO, which is the Project Management Office. Before, the secretariat of the National Committee, which is the FIU, they were the one who were involved. But after establishing the PMO became the focal point between the entities. It is in charge of receiving all statistics information from the competent authorities. It is in charge of the communicating with the FATF and MENA FATF for the assessment. And also it is in charge of updating the requirements or whatever, and following up and monitoring the progress of this project. So now we have submitted the technical compliance that happened on March 10th, and we've just submitted the technical compliance that happened last Thursday at 2 a.m. in the morning. So we took advantage of the time difference between us and Paris, so it was submitted thankfully on time. Well, after the NRA, which I'm going to leave I think it will be the second topic. After finishing the NRA, as well as the self-assessment, there were a lot of gaps. And for that, there were certain mitigation that were taken, meaning we came up with the new law. It is law number 20 of 2018. And also, we issued a bylaw of number 10 of 2019. And we also issued a UNSCR, which is United Nations Resolution sanctions, which was issued in 10 of 2019. You can see that 10, 20, 10, and 10. We're very lucky when it comes to the numbering of these laws. So we have a match here. Now we are in the process of the outreach, as David mentioned. We are sharing the result of the NRA with the competent authorities, and we ask them to share it with their regulated entities. It's very important. This is the key driver of success, to have an awareness of AML and CFT measurement here in the UAE. We also had the national committee come up with a national action plan. It's an evergreen plan. It has certain milestones and measures that has to be followed and monitored by the PMO. So there are certain things should be done on time, and we are really chasing the entities to that respect. We have a major also improvement, which when this project started, we had 48 competent authorities for the whole UAE. So imagine the number, and I felt pity for the assessors coming here and assessing the UAE. So what happened is that we came up with 3 supervisors for DNFPPs. We have 5 financial supervisors: Security and Commodities Authority, Central Bank, Insurance, as well as the FSA and ADGM, the FSRA. But when it comes to DNFPPs, unfortunately, as it is elsewhere, there was not much focus on these sectors. You know that there are 5 sectors here, except casinos. So 5 sectors, meaning notaries, accountant, dealers of precious and stones, company service providers, and I think lawyers and real estate. I mentioned them all, hopefully, the 5. So what happened is that the cabinet assigned 3 regulators. Ministry of Economy to be the supervisor for the onshore, meaning DEDs and registrars. The General Authority for Ports, Borders, and Free Zones, MENA, to be the supervisors for the free zones. So all the free zones should be supervised by MENA. And the Ministry of Justice to be the supervisor for when it comes to lawyers and notaries for the whole UAE, even when it comes to financial free zone. So, and also we had the new strategy, and it is published and was distributed to the all regulator, which includes, of course, the milestone, and it should be read with the National Action Plan. Do you want to go on?
I want to give you a break. I think you've earned it, but that's about as thorough sort of overview as we could hope for. But perhaps we'll bring Brian in, just go into a bit of detail from the DFSA's perspective.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add on to that. That was a wonderful summary that I think I learned a couple things there as well. So I think really what first off, I would say thank you once again for inviting me to speak at this forum. I guess in terms of demographics, I was answer C, I believe, so somewhere between 5 and 13. I drove my own car and cappuccino, I guess, to start the day. But I think in addition to thanking you, I think the UAE really, and all of us in the room need to thank Her Excellency Miriam Al-Suwaidi for being in the middle of this event, we'll say, for a long time, and we're now leading to the actual evaluation. So in some ways you could put it in the same sense as the weather that we've had over the past couple of days, that we had a big storm, so that's where we've been. It's getting clearer, that's where we are today, and in July it's going to get hot. So that's where we will be, I think. Just in terms of the DFSA and how we fit in to this, one is that the financial free zones do not have a criminal jurisdiction. So from the AML-CTF space, this is the most bifurcated part of our jurisdiction, where we are responsible for making sure that the firms in the DIFC have the proper systems and controls in place to combat money laundering, to fight terrorist financing, and make sure that we are reporting in an accurate, complete, and timely manner to the central bank's financial intelligence department about any suspicious activity. that's going on. And then it carries forward from there. So as a result of that role, we have been deeply involved in the preparation for the mutual evaluation, deeply involved in the national risk assessment preparation along the way. And I think we've moved, not we, I think Her Excellency has moved mountains to get to where we are right now, and there's still work to be done. We won't make any false impression that we're done here, that we filed something, and now we get to discussions. But along the way, in terms of the DIFC and the DFSA, our board of directors at the DFSA goes through an annual risk exercise, and we've done this for years. And without question, the AML-CTF issues always work their way into the top risks. And annually, my team has to defend what we're doing in a mitigating sense against the top 30 risks that our board has put in front of us. And we have identified this risk area as one of the top risks since the beginning of the center, so over the 15 years that we've been in existence. Because we know the whole world is waiting for something to happen. And we knew that we would be punished severely if something did happen in the DIFC. So taking that into consideration, after the mutual evaluation in 2007, we put through a number of corrections in our regime, a number of from the recommendations there. The FATF 40, as was identified, was revised. The methodology was revised in 2012. We did a self-assessment of our rules and our practices, made further amendments along the way. We've made further amendments in preparation for the mutual evaluation. We're making further amendments now that the laws and regulations at the UAE level are changing to make sure that we are completely consistent with those new laws and regulations, and that we fit squarely in with the objectives of the UAE in terms of getting this mutual evaluation right. Probably the one area that we've underestimated along the way is that after each FATF plenary, there are some reports that come out, some typologies, some methodologies, some trends, and we probably haven't reacted to those as quickly as we could have along the way, but now we have a process for dealing with that, and we're waiting for the next mutual evaluation. Has highlighted a number of the issues on digital identities, cryptocurrencies, etc. Will probably come out at the next plenary. So along with those rules and our board risk tolerance, that we have a focus on doing risk assessments by firms, by sector, and by product along the way. And we've issued thematic reviews, for instance, on a trade finance review. That's one of our biggest business models. We've issued a trade finance review and highlighted issues there. We do internal training and development for our staff, including we've over the years developed a bespoke program with a UK university as a certificate for our staff members to develop their expertise. And then we've also do an annual outreach to all the firms in the DIFC presenting a variety of issues, but there's always a focused section on AML-CTF. And the next one, which is be dedicated to this mutual evaluation and the national risk assessment, will be on March 25th. For those of you in the room who are planning or obligated to attend, March 25th will be the next outreach there. So I'll stop there. And
thank you so much, Brian, for your typically unique sort of overview of what's going on in the country at the moment. So, and if you'll both forgive me, from the sort of veterans of the UAE regulators, I think kind of the new kid on the block, as it were, Lana, from a regulatory perspective. Welcome. It's fantastic to have the RAC authority with us, and I think it's perhaps the first time we've had you at any of our summits before. So we'd love to hear what's going on since you've taken over down at the RAC authority.
Thank you, David. Great to be here together with my very distinguished colleagues, and it's an honor to speak alongside you. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Russell Kema have various free zones that are commercial in nature, so we're slightly different in our activity as DFSA and our colleagues in ADGM, but we have been very closely involved in the national risk assessment in terms of conducting a very detailed self-assessment exercise to identify the various vulnerabilities and threats that free zones specifically are prone to. As we know, free zones are open to AML and terrorism financing risks as a port of entry into the country. Before opening bank accounts, entities are being established by competent authorities in the UAE, and we feel it is our duty to perform appropriate level of due diligence to safeguard our country from entrants that may have illegitimate intentions. As part of the risk assessment work streams, we have been addressing the gaps and advancing on these gaps in terms of creating new procedures and rethinking the model that has been in place in the free zones in Ras Al Khaimah. The self-assessment identified interesting areas that we are now prioritizing our resources in. So the major shift in thinking has also been a very senior level commitment to the Emirates compliance plan by our ruler. So the top level commitment, Dr. Mariam, that you've mentioned, it's present in many Emirates now in our country, but I can speak on behalf of Ras Al Khaimah that it's one of the top priorities for our government. We, in terms of our preparation for the self-assessment, we need to make sure that we can demonstrate a very deep understanding and perception of the threats and vulnerabilities, because when the assessors come in July, this is our job to demonstrate that we understand where the risks are, specifically in the business model of free zones, and we address them, because as safeguards, it is a very important role. So we understand that the assessors will focus on free zones for those reasons. In terms of DNFBPs, we understand that it's something that has been identified as a high-risk area for our country due to our geographical location, openness of business, which has been something that attracts investors to the United Arab Emirates, and also due to a very high volume of trade in precious metals and gold and precious stones. These areas are open to money laundering and terrorism financing abuse, so we're actively addressing these issues. The regulatory regime is changing. We have seen a major transformation in the UAE legal and institutional framework. Dr. Mariam mentioned the new law, the bylaw, and the implementing regulations. All of that has happened over the last year, so there's been a huge effort on behalf of our legislators and regulators to come up with best industry practice in terms of regulation in line with the most developed countries around the world. So this assessment's really helped us speed up a lot of the projects that have been ongoing. It made us realize that we have a lot to do, a lot still has to be done in terms of bringing us into probably into that space where we're very comfortable that we're doing our best to address threats and vulnerabilities. But for me personally, from Ras Al Khaimah point of view, I think that understanding that we own the risk as Emirates, as free zones, we have to do more to combat that. We can no longer be in a position where we try to blame other entities and regulated entities. We can't blame banks, we can't blame FIUs for not doing their job. We have to own the risk, and I feel that for me, as a new entrant into the government authorities here in the country, it's a major shift. Everybody is stepping up and doing their best and really taking that responsibility. I've also wanted to highlight the fact that we have been very active members of the National Committee and Subcommittee on AML risk assessment, and I feel that that's probably very helpful, because it's not in many countries that I've seen that competent authorities are active members of national risk assessment. So when our countries has undertaken that risk assessment, they really took their time to get the perspective of each competent authority, of which we have very many in this country. Finally, I wanted to mention that many competent authorities, not just the Ras Al Khaimah ones, are doing a lot to bring their own regulations in line with the FATF standard. And I know there are various projects going on in most of that most of my colleagues in other free zones are doing, in terms of really looking at their policies and bringing them up to the standard of competent authorities and registration licensing authorities in America and the United Kingdom, to address the potential legacy issues that we've seen in the Middle East, and to reassure the financial community that this is a very safe place to invest. This is a very safe place to live and reside, and to operate, because we as regulators, we as authorities, and as a financial community, regulated entities, we participate very actively in protecting our country against these risks. So I think we can flow on to the national risk assessment activities. Dr. Marian, would you like to address that?
Thank you, Lana. Okay. Well, the process started back in 2016. The first task before the NRA subcommittee was to raise awareness, just to inform everybody that we're having assessment coming. So that was the first task, is just to inform them about the risk and the methodology, and what does this mean. Then we had the formal setup, which is we had the international expert. So we followed a tailor-made risk assessment process. It started by defining the threats. A threat, which is a person or a group which exploit the system to launder money, or the proceed of crime. So the threats mainly they're based on the 21 predicate crimes identified by FATF, and plus the money laundering, professional money laundering from a third party, so 22 altogether. After we follow a pre-defined factors, meaning the proceed of crimes, the actor capacity, as well as scope, the scope of the activity, of the ML activity. In doing that, we reached a list of the highest risk here in the UAE. So money laundering was one, trafficking drugs, fraud, as well as counterfeiting products. So these are the highest risk here in the UAE. We also conducted TF, or terrorism financing, also threat analysis, in which 8 groups were identified to be, a risk, to be to pose risk for the UAE law and order. So this was done in a confidential matter with the state security, with law enforcement, and so this was kept for the assessor and will be shared with them on the on-site. It was not distributed to them because of the sensitivity of the information. Then we undertook the vulnerability, the sectoral vulnerability, meaning the product, the service, the system, whatever that can be exploited for money laundering. So we have identified many sectors as being highest risk here in the UAE. Banks, of course, they came up of the list. We had 2 assessments, one for the onshore and one for the financial free zone. Because of the nature of the financial free zone and because of their types of products, so we had to do 2 assessments. For the onshore, banks were the first, or the highest threat, and money service and exchange house. from the medium high risk were so many. So they were insider trading as well as tax crimes. There's so many, which I'm sure Lana has a list somewhere because she will speak about their mitigation process. For the DFSA or ADGM, so the financial free zones, money service businesses came the first, and bank became there on the medium high. Some might wonder why we are in the same country and banks supposed to, rate different between onshore and financial free zone. Well, that due to a lot of factors. I believe bank is restricted from dealing with retail, and so for that it's different from the onshore and offshore. While the money service, money business or MTV or money business services, they are high in both jurisdictions because of the nature of this service. It is by nature exploit for money laundering and terrorist financing. So after conducting the NRA and sharing the result, we have shared the result with the competent authorities and asked them to share it with their regulated entities. At the beginning, seriously, the National Committee and the Higher Committee felt we should keep it hidden, but they came to understand that this is important for the process. So all the industry should come to know about our threats in order to have the proper mitigate. So that's what happened. We shared them. And now we're asking at the beginning, the outreach and the awareness was done by the PMO, but we took the approach of train the trainer, meaning that we gave the training for the competent authority in order for them to do it for their competent authority, and within their also entities. They should have done it for their staff as well. So that's almost, I think, everything when it comes to the NRA, but I can, add if you would like me to.